He died over 20 years ago at this point, but Kurt Cobain's is a name you'd be hard-pressed to forget. After more than 2 decades spent adorning sepia-tinted posters in college bedrooms, the late singer-songwriter is arguably more famous now than ever. His songs are played over the credits of TV shows, his images tour art galleries, and his words are regularly drawn in serif font and placed over postcard images next to music store checkouts. Year by year, his hagiography becomes inescapable. Like most of the celebrities branded with the dubious honours of the 27 Club, Cobain's life has become the stuff of legend. His tenure as the frontman of grunge pioneers Nirvana has gradually been enshrined as a cultural touchstone. His musical successes have seen him labelled as a counterculture icon, and the circumstances of his tragic suicide in 1994 have elevated him to the status of the voice of a generation without peer. Cobain, Montage of Heck, a HBO documentary released in 2015 and supported by Cobain's immediate family, tries to look beneath the voice of a generation hyperbole. A grounded, archival study, the majority of the documentary is told through old home video footage, in addition to animated renditions of his personal write-ins. As such, it largely avoids public discourse. By delving into the Cobain family's personal archives, it tries to paint a clearer picture of the man behind the posters.
He was searching for whatever made him feel like he wasn't alone, and that he wasn't so different.
I initially watched Cobain, Montage of Heck, alongside Nick Cave's 20,000 Days on Earth, and I think there was something serendipitous about that decision. In many ways, they're the perfect counterpoint to each other. 20,000 Days on Earth is a documentary that embraces singer Nick Cave's public persona. It's an abstract tribute to his storytelling abilities and the ways in which they've helped him shape new selves in the limelight. Montage of Heck, on the other hand, is a documentary that goes to great lengths to dispel its subject's public persona. It's a human, tangible approach to a man otherwise defined by his myth. In both cases, there's a lot to admire.
Tastes good.
Montage of Heck, titled after one of Cobain's early home-produced mixtapes, often feels uncomfortably intimate. There are snapshots of Cobain growing up, coming to terms with a burgeoning small-town isolation, playing with his daughter and otherwise messing around with home recording equipment. At times, it feels like gate-crashing into the lives of an unknown family and peering into the laundry basket. Cobain is pictured as a human, above all else, not as the sum of his successes, nor of his demons, but merely living alongside them. This approach wouldn't have suited a figure like Nick Cave. Cave would probably be the first to admit that he's too fond of storytelling to have allowed something so unflinchingly private and real to be released. He enjoys the theatricality of his public persona, and has had a large part in creating it. Cobain, however, clearly struggled with his time spent under the spotlight, and it shows. Montage of Heck displays a wide cross-section of Cobain's life, including the beginnings of his musical career with Nirvana, with a particular attention to his uneasy relationship with the media. It shows us a man with a straightforward emotional sensibility, a man who journalised extensively and who in doing so effectively voiced his own autobiography day by day. Whether flagellating himself for embarrassing teenage experiences or lashing out against the press's coverage of his personal life, there's something about the Cobain in Montage of Heck that seems wholly divorced from the man as enshrined in foldouts in HMV. Cobain's popular image is of a rebellious outsider born before his time. Montage of Heck readdresses this, paints him as an unwilling flag-bearer for a media-constructed generation that he didn't quite feel an affinity with.
I feel like people want me to die because it'd be the classic rock and roll story.
The documentary spends a while reflecting on how quickly stardom fell upon Cobain, and the effect that it had on his personal life. In tour footage, we see him alternate between hyperactive joy and drug-induced stupors, while in home video it shows us a vibrant but tired personality, clearly disillusioned with the way his life story is being told. In parts, it's not so much a biography as a straightforward human interest story, something that reflects less on the legacy of Nirvana's singer, and more on the inherent interest of a private life lived in the spotlight.
Damn, if I wasn't so needle sick, I'd be on tour with Guns N' Roses right now. Man. Me and Axel would be whooping it up, snake dancing across the universe.
Dancing across the stage together, singing Nazareth songs.
But I'm too goddamn music, man.
Montage of Heck doesn't entirely avoid Cobain's posthumous cult of personality, though. As is to be expected with any after-the-fact coverage, the film's occasional interviews with Cobain's friends and family tend to perpetuate ideas of fate and deservedness, especially when approaching his earlier years.
Everybody was coming over constantly. Can't even describe what a magnet he was. People just came to him.
Furthermore, there's a tendency for the film's journal segments to linger on the poetic tragedy of his eventual death, often to an exploitative degree. When spelled out visually, Cobain's morose poetry is cast in shadow and drowned in dirge, and any mentions of death or decay are subject to a slow zoom equivalent to a solemn shaking of the head. Any mention of suicide itself is highlighted with a wink and a nod, often seemingly suggesting some degree of causality where there likely was none, a trap that many Cobain conspiracy theorists fall into, and one that feels out of place in such a grounded study. Fortunately, the film offsets this through sheer volume of footage. As it turns out, Kurt Cobain wasn't always brimming with angst and rebellion, and it shows in most of his home footage. Here, Cobain is tender and goofy, jovial and irreverent, right up until the end, combating any overt dramatization in the editing. Those expecting a poetic story of the singer's unravelling or downward spiral will leave disappointed. There's no turning point when Cobain becomes beast or legend. Montage of Heck is a prolonged exploration of a man coping with depression and various vices, grounded in the realization that beyond the extreme edges, life went on. Perhaps this is why I'm so conflicted about the film's animated narrative segments. Presented over audio recordings of Cobain himself, these sections are often hyper-stylized and play into the commonly accepted, overtly romanticized image of Cobain. There's a particular emphasis on the grit and desolation of his home life, without paying attention to the more irreverent Cobain seen in home-recorded videos. A section in which Cobain has taped himself experimenting with different forms of recording and playback is animated as taking place under overcast skies in a darkened apartment, whereas the audio of the scene, taken on its own merit, actually suggests a playful Cobain in a more homely and warm setting. These segments are difficult to reconcile with the documentary as a whole. On the one hand, they're beautifully animated and contrast well with the film's long stretches of home video clips, highlighting the difference between the man as was and the way in which we've come to interpret him. On the other hand, they could equally be seen as lazy, half-baked visual filler for a film which otherwise goes a considerable distance towards rationalising Cobain's ongoing media circus. Not all of Cobain's life was spent looking moody under darkened skies, and these segments only highlight that fact, albeit clumsily. Most of Montage of Heck's shortfalls seem to stem from its length. Clocking in at 2 hours and 25 minutes, there's a lot that could have been left out. Many of the film's never-before-seen clips are, for all intents and purposes, worthless, and at times it seems like the film's innate voyeurism goes too far for the sake of idolatry, presenting clips that hold no interest bar the fact that they depict mundane moments in a dead celebrity's life. When it comes to dispelling hagiography though, perhaps there's nothing wrong with being thorough. With his home video collection practically exhausted, it seems like the only thing that could humanise Cobain any further is a time machine.
Will you guys, will you and Janet and everybody that I know sit in the front so I can look at you? Because I hate strangers.
Ultimately, Montage of Heck is a robust and interesting archival source, one that, with the assistance of Cobain himself and a few cover artists, is held together by a great soundtrack and some intelligent, thoughtful editing. The film's close, set to Cobain's cover of Leadbelly's Where Did You Sleep Last Night, is genuinely harrowing, and like many moments throughout, unashamedly heart-wrenching. It's moments like these when Montage of Heck works to the strengths of its subject. Whereas Nick Cave's 20,000 Days on Earth celebrates the potential that Stardom offers for transgression and resurrection, Montage of Heck warns of its inverse, alienating effects. Where it shines is when it plays into the genuine interest offered by Cobain's life under the microscope, rather than the tired myth offered by his band.